Global Content Hub. On our panel, we have Shri Apurva Chandra, Secretary, Minister of Information and Broadcasting, Mr. Ravinder Bhakar, Managing Director, National Film Development Corporation, Mr. Uday Singh, Managing Director, Motion Pictures Association, Apoorva Bakshi, Managing Partner, Audacious Originals, Paolo Bertolin, Festival Programmer, Film Writer and Producer, Todd Brown, Partner at XYZ Films, and Naman Ramachandran, International Correspondent at Variety, who will be heading this discussion for us.
Thank you. So as you can see, the topic is India as a global content hub. And in recent days, as in 3 or 4 days ago, the Indian Minister for Information and Broadcasting, just Anurag Thakur, said that the aim in the next 25 years is to make India a global content hub. And I know I asked you this question 15 minutes ago, but I'm asking you this on a panel. What concrete steps is the country going to take to make India a global content hub?
There are two aspects to India as a global content hub. One is that our own stories and how we are able to tell our stories, our history to the world. Also, as a content creation hub, that we attract foreign filmmakers to come and do their content creation here in India, whether by virtue of shooting or whether as a post-production, especially on the animation and virtual reality and the creation of that content on the AVGC side. As regards the AVGC, I think we have the skilled manpower, because it requires a cross-section of not just the technical manpower, but also those who have the skill to translate the vision into a proper animation on the, in the footage. Today, we have almost 160,000 people working in the AVGC sector. It is one of the fastest growing sectors in the media and entertainment industry of India, growing at almost 26 to 27% every year. But I must admit that it is a low base because we still constitute only about 1 to 1.5% of the world market. So there is a tremendous scope to grow. For that, the government recently created a task force on AVGC, which comprised of various industry members and professionals. The report is now ready. We are going to submit it. And the focus of this, the effort on AVGC would be on skilling and education at both at school level and at the college level, so that more and more skilled manpower, we can scale up from 150,000 to 1 million people. There is a lot of talent in this country, and we want to take this forward. Apart from that, the National Center for Excellence for AVGC is being set up in partnership with, again, with private industry. We don't want it to be a purely government institution. And we are thinking of setting up regional AVGC centers also. So that is on the AVGC side, apart from, and on the, this market itself, because we want to promote film festivals so that more and more buyers come and look at our content. And for shooting, the film facilitation office, we are of NFDC, we are trying to revamp in a big way. You would see in the market that there are a number of states also, and we would like to ease that up. Thank you.
Mr. Bhakar, in May this year at Cannes, India announced a number of incentives, filming incentives for international production shooting here. What has been the take-up of how many people have applied? Do you have any numbers? And what's been the general interest internationally so far?
Yeah, Naman, in fact, we announced our incentives in a big way. They were long awaited. And since you are asking the data, we have received around 12 applications so far from the international co-production. And very soon we will be granting them the incentives as well as. We got few suggestions from the filmmakers about our incentive policies also, and we are very open to incorporate those suggestions as well as, so that they should become more and more lucrative to the filmmakers. That we are in the process, because we believe content hub doesn't mean a place where the content can be produced. The entire ecosystem should be there, which should facilitate the filmmakers. The content should be created, then there should be a right audience that should reach the right audience. So adequate number of platforms has to be provided. So in fact, today for the whole first half, we were discussing with the various startups how NFDC can come in and provide a platforms for the small filmmakers or the quality content creators who are kind of struggling to pitch their content on the popular networks or the cinemas.
And moving to you, Mr. Singh, we had this discussion the other day about the incentives, and you had mentioned that the incentives are not really grants, they are investments for the future. Can you expand on that?
The view is that, in fact, we talked about it the other day, that there's a recent New Zealand study which talks about every dollar that you put into incentives gives you back a return of about $6.15, and this is on the conservative side. There are other studies which also point it's between $7 to $14, and it's no small wonder that a lot of jurisdictions look at it as an important source of FDI coming into the country. Canada being one, on the same timeline as LA, got in $2.8 billion as investment into the country. The refreshing approach now, which I think the government has, and I have to congratulate Secretary Apoorva Chandra, is to look at it from the outsider's perspective and looking into the country or what we can do from their point of view, rather than just keep on push and sell from us. How can we get that pull element that, this country has great incentives, clearances go really fast, and it's no longer red tape, it's red carpet, and that we are now totally in line with wanting to bring them here and appreciate the country. A lot of jurisdictions do familiarization tours where they come to the country, and it's India. This is bound to happen, that it's going to come up and be one of the major players in the world in this space. It's a matter of time, but I think the direction is correct, and he set the tone beautifully that this is the way we want to go. And if, from an incentives point of view, it's a very competitive world. There are about 100 plus incentives floating across the world in various jurisdictions. So when you're actually making a film, 2 or 3 things you want. You want predictability and clarity that these incentives are going to come. They're going to come fast. They're going to be handheld through the whole process, not just that, oh, you've come onto my portal and it's done. You have to see them through, and that's the plan that we have. So it has to be seamless right through till the incentive rolls out. And as you know that we have 2 levels of incentives. One is at the federal level and the other is at the states. And that's stackable. So you can actually get that, and you can get the benefit of this as well. So I think what eventually will happen is not just the cost arbitrage, the dollar to rupee arbitrage benefits that we have. We have world-class crews. We also have time zone benefits, especially in the AVGC sector, because the 13-hour time difference between LA is beautiful, because you could actually do some work and download it, and then Bangalore or Hyderabad will do the back end and then put it back in. So kind of shrink timelines as well. So we saw that in the software services. I can see that happen in the AVGC sector as well. So I think we are poised for it. And I think with the leadership we have a very, very good chance of really being competitive on the world stage. And this dream of being a content hub is very, very doable in my view.
I've been trying to talk to my office in LA since Monday. I haven't succeeded. So, Paolo, a question in 2 parts for you. You've been a mentor at Film Bazaar for a very long time, helping projects develop. And on the other hand, you're also a programmer for the Venice Film Festival. So what more can the Film Bazaar do to create content that is global enough for you to select it at Venice? Because this year there wasn't a single Indian film at Venice.
Okay, you put me on the spot and with a difficult question to answer. But let me say one thing that is a premise to the possible answer. I think that right now we are at a very positive moment of change within the industry in India. The fact that all these different bodies have now been put together under the umbrella of NFDC is something that could facilitate and streamline the policies that can support filmmaking, not just in terms of promoting India as the place where to shoot a film for foreigners, but also to help the independent filmmakers to have a more conductive kind of environment, and in a way that, they have one referent, one stop to connect with in order to relate to the international as well. And a place like Film Bazaar is exactly that kind of interface where independent talents from all over the country, because we mentioned this is a country of many different identities, are coming over here to meet with the rest of the world. And the rest of the world that is interested in India, in Indian content and content from all the different corners of the country is coming over here. So on the one hand, if you talk about specifically Film Bazaar, the role of Film Bazaar is that of implementing and strengthening this kind of connection by helping these Indian filmmakers who only can find these people from abroad here at Film Bazaar, because this is unfortunately the only event for the whole region where, you know, we foreigners can come in and meet with the people from the industry. So I feel that it has to be even more conductive in the sense of bringing in the producers who could help working on co-productions, the salespeople, the funders, because there are funds outside of India that are accessible to Indian filmmakers. So those players, you should entice them to come over to Film Bazaar to make sure that the filmmakers who come every year from the whole of India, like a pilgrimage to Film Bazaar, because they hope to sell their films, they hope for their films to be seen by programmers, by sales agents, or their projects to meet with the potential partners in the international stage. It is the one spot where to meet. So I feel like it is very, very important. Now it's difficult because we are just outside of the pandemic, but hopefully things will come back to normal. It is really important that this space, now that also a connection, literally a promenade that leads to IFFI has been established. Now that everything can become one, can be more integrated, it's exactly the time when it would be good to also strengthen this further bridges with the rest of the world. And I think Indian filmmakers, both the mainstream and the independent ones, are great storytellers. They have a lot of talent, they have vision, they can express themselves with the most sophisticated, arty kind of films, but also the most accessible, the most entertaining ways of enchanting audiences. And there is this just, one spot that could become the, must-attend event, not just for me, like me, you already bought me. You don't need to buy Paolo Bertolin because Paolo Bertolin is already on your side, but you need to buy even more people. And these people who can help filmmakers, who can help institutions grow and become more integrated, not just within India, but with the rest of the world. So I think this is a great spot. There's still, there has been the pandemic. That halted everything. And now we are coming out of it, and now things can bloom again, hopefully, here at Film Bazaar. And this could be a very, very important starting point where to bring even more widely, even more brilliantly in Indian content on the stage of the whole world.
Thank you. Now that brings me to you, Apurva, which is, Bakshi. Paolo talked about storytelling. Now, you're one of, India's success stories abroad, having produced Delhi Crime, which is a global success, and it was at the Emmys and all of that. So in terms of, and you have a small slate of 19 projects coming up, and most of which are India or South Asia based. So in terms of storytelling, how do you, as a producer, how do you approach each of the projects on your slate to make it appeal to a global audience?
Thank you, Naman. It's 23 now because NFDC gave me more projects. And thanks to Leena and Vikram and everybody who've organized such an incredible forum here. The curated projects are incredible. As my journey started with Delhi Crime, you can imagine that it was an arduous one. The intention is to find very local stories because I think we have incredible stories to tell. I'm an army child, so I've traveled with my dad across the country, and there's just every corner is burgeoning with incredible local stories that have very globally relatable emotions that translate. And it's important to be able to support those voices. I feel like that's where my hunting ground is, always. Established filmmakers who have traveled and exported their materials, thanks to, people like Paolo and Todd, who've always come and really identified those voices that can travel globally. I think they need to really stop, tracks, make you think and feel more deeply, and I think that story lives in every corner of our country. So India as a content hub, I think we already are. I think it's not a 25-year-old goal, but I feel like we can do a lot more internally to support our filmmakers. And I come with a lot of plea and a little bit of knowledge in terms of what is it that they really need. When I landed here, I had a lot of meetings with very established, my old friend filmmakers, but I literally went to this small resort called Bambolim where new script writers were sitting. And they are nervous. They started out like me, and the intention is to be able to understand how do we support them. I think a lot of the technical side of things has been taken care of. I think we are a powerhouse like none other. We used to run to Canada for tax credits most of the times, but I think we have great post facilities here now. When it comes to nurturing story at that level, at a root level, where they want to stay authentic and not make it for a Bollywood viewing, local state stories need to be nurtured very specifically. And I think story development labs need to be set up. Just like you said, at a federal level and a state level, I think private labs are coming together just to fill the need gap, and we are doing everything. There's a Writers Inc., there's a Producer Land, like privately producing gangs are coming together to be able to nurture the next round of not only producers who actually don't have a film school to go to in the country, Honestly, that is a program that must be set up. And with filmmakers, it is just to be able to handhold them. I know a ton of mentors from across the world who will jump ship and come here to be able to do, master classes, workshops, and just tell them that it's a journey that is long, and hustle should be your middle name. And at every level, be it Nolan, Anurag Kashyap, or you starting out, you are hustling. And so it's really that intention with which I come. As you're my namesake, so I'm going to make a special plea. But story nurturing is very crucial, and that will take us even further from where we've gone. We will not be few names, but many names in the global circuit.
I'm glad you said hyper-local stories, because that's the question I'm going to ask Todd, who this morning it was announced that they have acquired their very first South Asian project. So first question, do you have good news for the filmmakers in the audience? Is XYZ looking to acquire Indian projects?
We're always looking everywhere. I have a very fundamental belief that just talent wins, story wins. Humanity is just wired for narrative. We have this deep desire to connect with other people and to understand them, and this is where it happens. So absolutely, yes, we are looking for talent here, always. And as people have been talking about, part of that is, it's the importance of story and people that are able to tell their stories in ways that are very approachable and embracing of an audience. I would echo. I mean, if you're gonna invest in any one area for long-term success of a local industry, screenwriters, 100%, 100%. If you look at, I'm Canadian. The company is American, but I'm Canadian, and I've always stayed in Canada. And if you look at the Canadian industry, bluntly, the English-speaking Canadian industry is a cavalcade of failure. To try to name a recent Canadian English-speaking breakout director, it's really hard to do. You can't name 5 of them in the last decade. They don't exist. Have that conversation about Quebecois directors and the French-speaking Canadian directors. It's really easy. And if you look at why there was this generation when Denis Villeneuve happened, Jean-Marc Vallée happened, Denis Arcand, there's a block of them in that group. Why did it happen? It happened because 10 years before they broke, SODEC, the French funding agency in Quebec, put a lot of money into story labs. They actively sought out promising young writers and were like, this isn't going to pay for a while. It's probably not going to pay for 5 to 10 years, but we are going to put a bunch of money into you and just support that and train you. And then 10 years later, you look at what has happened. It worked. But people are just wired for story everywhere. And I also very, very strongly believe that we're right on the cusp of a very major social change right now. There's a very, very significant generational change that isn't being talked about all that much, which is just the consequences of the world becoming broadband and digital access. And I think part of why we don't talk about it is our generation assumes that we understand it because we lived the change. But we don't understand it because we were already trained in traditional physical media. And if you look at kids now, kind of in the range of like kind of the 10 to 15-year-olds is where it starts, those kids, a lot of them, and it's even more so for the younger ones, most of them were digitally literate before they were speaking. And one of the consequences of that, I look at my own daughter who's 17, and she's got the most mainstream taste ever. But the oldest adage has always been that language is a problem, especially coming into America, that subtitles are a barrier for audiences. You look at that generation, it is not true. And the reason it's not true is these things. You know, they've spent their entire life on social media, watching YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, and I can tell in my house when my daughter's been watching the television downstairs because the subtitles are on. She turns the subtitles on English material because it's what she's used to on her phone. The limit is no longer language. It's the actual storytelling. It's the types of stories we're telling. It's the format of them. It's the way we are using or not using genre. It's all of those other things. That young generation coming up now are global citizens in a way that has never existed before, ever. And I think the potential consequences of that around the world in terms of being able to reach a global audience are astounding. I mean, Delhi Crime was one of the early case studies of that in Netflix, but you just look at what like the all-time top performing shows are on Netflix. And like in that kind of top 5, top 10, you've got Squid Game, you've got Money Heist, you've got Dark, you've got Delhi Crime. And when you talk to execs at Netflix, one of the things they will tell you, and what surprised them, and they were not planning for it, they were not expecting it, is that even though they do 6 to 8 different language dubs on their shows, all of those hit shows, somewhere between 85 and 90% of the audience watches it in original language with the subtitles on. Language is no longer a barrier. And I think that's incredibly exciting.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chandra, I'll stick to surnames. I think it's simpler. So, Ms. Bakshi is one of our most successful exports. What is the Indian government planning to do or doing to support people like her and her and people like her to flourish and make content in this country?
You mean from a successful export, now we should import her back now? No, Apurva, I must compliment you. Daily Crime, I have also watched, and one of the most outstanding series. And as Todd mentioned, so breaking of the language barrier, I think that is perhaps the most important, because we in India, we ourselves have also now got hooked to the southern films, South Indian films, which we in India, we also did not have access. Because either we were watching Hindi films and the South Indian films we did not have access. But now with the dubbing and everything, subtitling becoming so easy, and the OTTs, everybody getting used to OTTs during the COVID period, it has really become very easy for us to watch any content from anywhere in the world. And that is why serials like Daily Crime, which is a very, very typical Indian story, but it resonated throughout the world. And so many other Indian stories are now transgressing the Indian borders. Like from south, they are coming to the north, and even RRR and all films like that are doing internationally very well. As regards people like her, that how do we nurture? Yes, that is the most important question. And uh, in this film festival itself, for the first time, I think we have started this book to the box office, so that there is a nurturing of writers, so that the creative ideas of writers can be taken to the production to the next level, as people like Todd and others they are mentioning. And this 75 creative minds, which is again running very successfully, that again is a effort to nurture the talent. Now the first people compete to come within this 75. Now this 53-hour challenge which has been given, and 5 teams competing and creating shots. So that again is an effort to nurture this talent. The other thing which we were, as of now it is more of a loud thinking, because not much has gone into it, but what we are thinking is that at NFDC, currently what NFDC runs on its website is its own productions and co-productions, just about 200 films, which the slate of those films is also pretty old. Many of them are 30 years old or 40 years old. So we should expand this, and on NFTC, we should create a OTT platform where we give an opportunity to all those who don't get to showcase their, or on a Netflix or Amazon or some such platform. So we should be able to provide a platform of good quality content to all the creative minds of our country like Apurva, and give them an opportunity which can be showcased on a permanent basis, apart from the film festival, where again it gives an opportunity and a market. Mr. Pilcher is here now from the Shorts TV. We can collaborate with people like him or any other who are there, and with NFTC to provide such a platform, so that non-feature, feature films which are still not getting a commercial exhibition or not really ready, that can go, that can be provided a platform for the others to see.
And moving to you, Mr. Bhakar, carrying on the whole conversation, I think you mentioned the pavilions. To pick up on that, now the pavilions this year are, obviously they've been expanded from what used to be, small rooms here to a proper promenade, and where countries are rubbing shoulders with states. So do you think that there's a synergy being created, and is the NFDC actively trying to promote that synergy?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we are kind of giving a platform to the content creators. States wants to promote their destination as in the preferred and suitable for the filming for the international filmmakers. So the pavilions will be in more, they can in a better way showcase their state or their places as a preferred filming destination to the international filmmakers. That was one of the purpose. Then the purpose of creating these pavilions was not only the countries, various states, the industries, the distribution offices. This time, although we were having it a bit short and a lot of construction needs to be done to set up all these pavilions. Probably in the next edition of the CFI, we will be in a better position to expand these pavilions in a big way, and then we will invite as much as countries as possible, as well as the big production houses. Because I got a request from a few of the countries and the production houses if many of the big production houses in Mumbai or other parts of the country, if they can also be invited, and we can have a bigger buyer-seller meet, and even the book-to-box office, this time even in the first edition of its launching, we got more than 30 entries from there also. And I was pretty mesmerized with the kind of response this kind of book adaptation programs were getting, the kind of response in the other international film festivals. So we are in the process of, kind of bringing the best practices of the other festivals also to our festivals with Be Truly Indian at Heart. So like this 75 Creative Minds are our totally brainchild of honorable ministers, and plus a number of new initiatives will also be coming up in the next editions. So efforts are basically in the directions to provide platforms and opportunities so that the filmmakers can collaborate and they can co-produce as much as content as possible.
Great. Mr. Singh, you had mentioned, and speaking of local storytelling that Apoorva Bakshi talked about, you had mentioned that you can get the incentives, and there are the incentives from the states that are stacked up. There are 18 states with incentives. So is the MPA doing anything specific to supplement the efforts of the Indian government bodies to make sure that these incentives are available to all your members?
To begin with, at Cannes, our chairman was with the minister when the incentives were announced. So that got a lot of visibility already. The fact that now all our studios are fairly, I think almost all of them are briefed about what is going on. They're pretty much in sync with what we are doing. And there's a production council that meets very frequently, which looks at, what are the opportunities. But coming back to what he said about the digital opportunity, we know how digital India is, right? And the benefit is that once you have that seamless system, which we are envisaging happens, as they say today, geography is history, given the borderless world that we live in. So, and that I think all the content is traveling the same way, because South Indian content traveling here, Israeli content coming in here. Through the pandemic, we've seen this repeated over and over again, that geography is becoming history in many of our assumptions. So I think once we take that digital leapfrog where somebody can get a full understanding of what it is, that when the locations are there, and we have some extraordinary locations without doubt, we have global crews. Once they have that inventory of locations, inventory of familiar, crews, filmmakers, and everybody, which can be available at a click of a button or on the mobile phone, considering that 98% of the access here is through mobile phone to the internet, we really could leapfrog that. I mean, I can even think of an app which can just kind of take you through the whole process. So I think it's not inconceivable that if we really harness the digital power that we have, bringing in not just our studios, I think bringing in international companies here is not going to be a big problem, as long as they feel that there is somebody who's hand-holding them through the process, not just leaving them halfway. I think as a revamp of the portal and everything going seamlessly, that should probably help matters in a lot of ways. Once that has, we've been the evangelists for trying to bring productions here for the longest time, for the last 10 years. I remember 10 years ago when we started, we were literally laughed off the block. Who will give incentives to the film industry? Now we have 18 states and we have a federal incentives. So we've stuck that through, and like I said, it's been like a Sisyphus for the most part. You push the rock up the hill, and then people change, and then we have to go back again. But through that all, we've stayed the course, and we've seen that we've come to this point. From here, I can only see that we can go to the next level. Maybe if we have a one marquee production come here, the word of mouth is king in this business. Once they come here, they see that whole process work smoothly, speedily, predictably, and transparently. I think we definitely have a very, very strong story to tell. I think India Invest also has a terrific infrastructure, 28 offices, and resources to be able to do that and take it to America and other places.
I would like to put a request here. We have gone digital with our taxation and SCIS export policies, which are obviously changing, but it'll be incredible to have some sessions specific to producers who pump in money, like all my money comes from the United States, and it is very important for investors to believe that export of tax and credits happen in time. Across the world, it's maximum 6 months, and that's the threshold that everybody meets best practices. And in India right now, it's crossing 3 years. So it's really important for that to really heal in the system. And I absolutely agree with you, sir. A local, like Doordarshan, our beloved Doordarshan needs to be a platform. I have a digital wing where local content, local language content can be showcased, because global streamers also have a bandwidth, and very good content just gets lost all the time. So they can really find that public backing, like other countries as well, to be showcased and in posterity. Like a Doordarshan acquisition for me will be absolutely, the biggest. A national award for me is bigger than the Emmy. So these things, we come with the spirit of patriotism, but these systems, if they can repair themselves, and I feel the energy today and synergy in the market with the IFI coming together. It's like Paolo mentioned, I think it's incredible. I think we are on a path that we would like to embark on.
Yeah, and if I can follow that from the international perspective, what you were saying, you're 100% right in terms of what will draw. We work internationally all the time, and we run production models all the time on a completely agnostic basis. Just pure cost benefit, where does it make the most sense to go? And the biggest thing right now, like we've never, ever in the run of the company considered coming here because it's a black box. And we just don't know. We, like from the outside looking in, you don't know, like what is the studio situation? You know, what is the level of crewing? What are the costs? Like how reliable are they? And I think what you're going to find is as these new incentives come in, it's definitely going to attract attention. The first probably 4 or 5, it's going to take some wooing to get people to kind of come and take it seriously. But if those productions go well, the floodgates will completely open. I mean, weirdly, I would say an interesting allegory to this would be how the production community in New Zealand has changed. You know, before Lord of the Rings, everybody's like, why on earth would you ever go to New Zealand? It's incredibly far away from everything. It is a major destination now because they have an understood, reliable incentive. Everybody knows that their crews are good. Everybody knows that their studios are good. And you look here, and like on a base level, what do you have? You have a thriving local industry. You have a lot of people who are very well trained. You obviously have a lot of very, very high-end technical people. You have an English-speaking crew base, which is a major draw and an advantage that you have over a lot of places. And you have a very low cost of labor. If people trust that the system will work and that the corporate culture can talk back and forth in a way that satisfies both sides, there will be a massive wave of incoming business. For sure there will be.
Before Lord of the Rings, New Zealand experienced Kaho Na Pyar Hai with Hrithik Roshan, which increased which is a Bollywood film with one of Bollywood's top stars. That was his debut film. And that increased the Indian tourism to New Zealand by about 600%. So
I mean, you look at Lord of the Rings and like what that did to New Zealand tourism was astonishing.
Billions.
Yeah, and you'll see a lot of that happen. Like there's lots of spin-off benefits to bringing production here. There's a lot of them.
And Paolo, oh, sorry, did you want to say something? Yeah. I just wanted to ask you about the States. Over the years, as a mentor, have you seen, I mean, Mr. Chandra talked about, you know, how in the years of pandemic, people have become more aware of South Indian films. So as a mentor at Film Bazaar, have you seen any emergence of South Indian projects specifically?
Well, I'm not really a mentor here. I mean, I'm coming to meet with the projects and I'm trying to see the films that are being completed here. And of course, I've always been interested in the different voices and the different talents. And it was just sometimes a coincidence that I stumbled across some film from Tamil Nadu or Kerala, but it is the same as it happens with other festivals that maybe are showcasing films from Assam or Manipur. And this is actually the great treasure trove of Indian cinema, the fact that this is a country that incorporates several other smaller countries. I don't know if this is the politically correct way to put it, but regional cinema here in India is very strong. It's very important. There are voices that are original and creative, and it's very interesting that they are expressing themselves in ways that sometimes are not aligning with the current trend, maybe in another part of the country. So that's a very specific aspect. And in that regard, it would be interesting, something that could be interesting for I don't know, the Indian institutions in general to think about is that exactly because you have this kind of landscape or environment where there is a great industry production in Hindi, but also in Tamil language, also in Bengali language, maybe both at central, federal level and at the level of the different communities, some incentives and grants are established to nourish the kind of initiatives that Apurva was mentioning earlier, kind of development labs, initial development grants or production grants for independent films in order for them to have more resources, more time to create those films. Because then the problem I'm facing, because earlier you were asking me why, I mean, you are implying why there were no films from India this year in Venice.
You didn't answer that question.
Huh?
You didn't answer that question.
I didn't answer the question. Now I'm answering. You know, I said earlier that I'm already bought. So I'm the one who is championing Indian films. Then I have to confront myself with people who care about Indian films as much as they care for Canadian films or films from Czech Republic. Actually, I also care about those. I mean, I'm also working with those. But what is the problem? For Bollywood films, there's a specific problem of timing. Bollywood films are always ready at the very last minute, just before the release, so we cannot watch them. We tried so hard with several films in the past, even this year. The producers wanted to show us the films, but our timeline didn't match theirs. They would always be ready too late. When it comes to the smaller, independent art house films, oftentimes the problem is that the films are too small. The production-wise, they are made with, you know, this kind of equity investment from local investors who then are labeled as producers, and it's not enough. It's not enough in terms of the kind of resources that have been invested in development, because this kind of money you have to usually spend it quickly, because maybe this investor will change his or her mind, and then the director himself or herself has to account for everything. And maybe if there was the possibility to access this kind of resources at development stage or at production stage at a central level or at a state level, that would help a lot, because then that would entail also the possibility for these filmmakers and producers to better work with the international co-producers. Because one of the problems that the people who come here as potential co-producers of Indian projects face oftentimes is the volatility of the resources that are in place here in India. As I was saying, the money coming from equity, sometimes it's volatile. You have to spend it quickly because of the matter of the producer wanting to spend that money within the next 5 or 6 months. So the potential co-producer cannot apply for the grants that he or she could access within their countries. So yeah, I don't want to be too complicated, but this is an interesting step that could be envisaged for the future in order to help more and more. I mean, the voices are there, the talents are there, in order to help them, support them to be more connected with the international scene, and also take advantage of those incentives and rebates that are already there. Because if a co-production is created, then they themselves can actually access those rebates, because they become a French film, they become a German film, or an Australian film. I don't know which kind of countries would be more conducive and interested in working with India, but there are these possibilities. Some other Asian, Southeast Asian countries are more and more getting into this kind of prospect of providing this kind of resources. So maybe this is one step that could be thought about, and it could be interesting not only for film production, because Todd was mentioning earlier the importance of new devices to watch content, but there is also new content that is thought for those devices, which is web series. Now we have VR, and many institutions in other countries are already moving ahead in terms of, you know, thinking of the audiovisual industry not just as, you know, the cinematic experience, but also the web experience and the VR experience. I'm taking the example of Screen Australia. Now Screen Australia is a body that is investing probably more in serial content than in feature-length content for cinemas.
And specifically in stuff for web as well, which is very unusual for a national funding body, and it's turned into a major talent incubator for them.
I think India can do that too. India can do fantastically well also in the web and in VR. It's the next step. I hope it happens.
And if I can just quickly build on one thing that Paolo mentioned there, when you're talking about Indian film getting out, I think a really important thing that you touched on there, because it's not just for festivals, it's also about accessing the sales market. You need to be really thinking about the way release windowing works internationally, and certainly on the larger scale Indian films, if you're working with a distributor that's accessing the diaspora market, I completely understand the economic incentive for doing that. I mean, there's real money there. I get why people are chasing it. What happens when you do it, though, is it means you've already released your film in the United States, you've already released it in Canada, you've already released it in all these places, it's happened simultaneously everywhere, and it means the non-diaspora audience, the distributors that are catering to the rest of the marketplace are like, no, you've already broken our window. The core audience is not going to be interested. And I think one of the things that has to happen, and you talked about the pace of things, is the tendency here is you make it and you release it as soon as it's done. You really kind of, especially as an independent, you need to leave a buffer in there, if it's at all possible, of somewhere, I would say conservatively, 9 months to a year, to give yourself that much space to play and get out on the festival circuit, to be seen internationally, to be able to gauge what the international marketplace is. If there are international buyers out there that are going to be interested, they're going to need that much lead time to be able to schedule it and window it. And especially as we're getting into digital release windows, as soon as something is available digitally here, like it's game over for everybody. It is a digital single market. And so to be able to entice international buyers, they need to, at minimum, be able to align with what is happening here.
That needs training for the financiers, right?
Yes.
The patience on the long tail has to be brought in. So, yeah.
All right, so the clock has wound down and we don't have any more time. Sorry to cut this short, but thank you everyone for being here.
Just on the incentive part, the issue of the incentives and the GST, I think that was raised yesterday also by the Motion Picture Association, and we promised to have a look at that, and because that is something we'll, the refund of GST, that issue was raised very heavily by Motion Picture Association.
Thank you so much.
And as regards the other incentives and the ease of doing business, yes, that is definitely very important, and that is why I mentioned yesterday also in that forum that that is why we have taken Invest India on board. They have a long experience of dealing with the ease of doing business and incentives and all the rest. In fact, they have been handling on the manufacturing side, they have been handling all this for the past 8 years, and the FDI in the country has increased from $10 billion to $60 billion annually now. So now they are entering into the space of services also, and that is why we have handed over the FFO to them, so that the Film Facilitation Office of NFDC becomes the one-stop shop, whether it is for filmmakers applying to the country for shooting, or whether it is the incentives, not only at the federal level, but also at the state level. So we should do an end-to-end service, and we hope that we will be able to come up with a better